Hello, hello, hello. Josh isn't with us today, so we have to start off our workshops with that.
What's our shout out?
So we're going to give it a few minutes while everybody piles in. We can see everybody coming in right now. We're here. We have Barrett, we have Jacqueline and Jackie and Kimberly. So this is going to be an exciting workshop. But
yes.
So please remember the famous Spider-Man quote, with great powers come great responsibility. And that's to protect you and your organization. By doing red teaming, you could potentially get fired. You could have problems. So you want to make sure that you're doing things with the utmost care and get everything in writing before you do anything. And we're gonna go through and talk about all this. I've done it in organizations, and Kimberly, and there's, I've got in trouble before by doing red teaming. I'll talk about some of those experiences and how I learned early in my career. And it's just crazy. Jackie, you're going to say something?
Not on this topic, but just on the topic of the presentation. I just wanted everybody to know that this will be super interactive. We expect a lot of questions. There's a couple ways to do that. You can go in chat and you can post questions to all, questions to the panelists. You can also do a question in the Q&A. But I just wanted to cover off on that real quick before we introduce ourselves.
Okay. Kimberly, do you want to say hi to the audience?
Sure. Happy to be here. Excited to talk about red teaming.
Yeah. So it's when we picked this topic, it was kind of funny. We all had stories where somebody got in trouble. And so.
Not me. I just know somebody who got in trouble.
Well, for me, I personally have gotten in trouble before. And then I learned from that, and then did a red teaming exercise where it allowed me to get my certified ethical hacking certificate, because they were impressed and said, okay, you need to get a some sort of degree or certification, so then we can show it to our customers. And I was working at a financial institution where we did 30% of the credit reports for the nation. And all of the credit reports were over lease line, and we were going to go to internet. And so they wanted to show that, hey, we've really done our due diligence, and we've even, red teamed ourselves to figure out where the problems were. And so by me doing my red teaming exercise, they said, wow, we see the value in it. So I'll tell about that story in a little bit, but let's kick this off. Are you ready, Jackie?
Yeah, let's go.
Okay. So I'm Benjamin Powell, Senior Product Manager here at Microsoft RiskIQ. I worked in IT for over 35 years. Half of my time as a practitioner and running teams. Worked in state, local government, the port district, the airport, financial services, manufacturing, software development. So I have a lot of experience, and I've worked with every type of customer known to mankind when I worked at all the different startups. So I've seen it all and experienced it all. Fun fact, I'm into spearfishing. So we're going to talk about, not this type of spearfishing where I catch them in the ocean, but how you could, it's part of your red teaming is doing spearfishing campaigns and trying to get the credentials and get access. And we'll talk about that, and I'll show a tool. I did a recording a while back that we'll play, and we'll walk through it. So Jackie, I'll kick it off to you.
Yeah. So my background is a little different, mostly marketing experience and a couple years in cybersecurity. Worked for the Kansas City Chiefs. And I say that because, man, that was a tough loss last week. Yeah. Well, you guys had one too on the West Coast. And then also Coca-Cola. And I am the voice of our RiskIQ commercials, promotions, videos, also sang the Star Spangled Banner for the Super Bowl parade that we won here several years ago. And my fun fact is, of course, I worked at Coca-Cola, so I had to drink a lot of it. I love Diet Coke. So that's my fun fact.
Awesome.
Kimberly. Tell us about yourself. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. So I'm Kimberly Ortiz. I'm a senior program manager here at Microsoft/RiskIQ. My background is largely in network security. I actually started out in government doing threat hunting on classified networks and evolved from there through various kind of analyst roles, all focused on gathering threat intelligence and applying that in a variety of different use cases.
Awesome. So I know that we're going to have some fun stories. We want to make this interactive. So if you have a question, please speak up, because if you're thinking it, other people are as well. And we like to make sure that the answers get out there, the good and the bad, so you understand what's happening. So
yeah, and we also need a break to breathe sometimes. So we like the questions so we can just stop for a second. So thank you for being here. One of our attendees will receive a $100 American Express gift card as we're doing the presentation. So stay on, that'll happen towards the end. And we just want to say thank you. So I believe our poll questions are next. This is my favorite part.
Yeah. And we made it a little bit different. They're not the usual poll questions. They're very specific to the topic today, just so we understand the audience.
Yeah, typically when we were in person, right, we would be able to ask, warm up the audience and ask these in person, but this is the best alternative that we have. So the first one's already on there. Have you attended one of these workshops before? Yes or no? And this just helps us to kind of know, where you're at, if we need to go over things, cover on things, slower or back up.
Talk about the interface, things like that.
Talk about the interface.
Okay, so 67 have attended a workshop before, 33% no. Okay, great.
All right, and you know this about us already, but the next question is, how long have you been working in cybersecurity? Less than 2 years, 2 to 5 years, more than 5 years, or never? And again, this just helps us. There's a lot of acronyms, 3-letter deals. Do we need to break that up and talk about that or explain things more in depth? So this kind of helps us to understand that as well.
And if you have any questions about those acronyms I'm going to use today, Jackie, just let me know.
Yeah, I'll be asking for you guys.
Okay, so we have 90% less than 2 years, 23% 2 to 5 years, 49% more than 5 years, and 9% never. So, okay, a good mix.
All right, next, and we only have a couple more of these, so bear with us. Are you currently doing red teaming in your organization? Yes, no, what is red teaming? So I will be asking. I mean, I have a good idea of what red teaming is, but I'd like to hear. Maybe
I wore red today. I wore red today because we're doing red teaming.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I thought, we're doing this thing on red teaming. Everybody wear red, and let's huddle up.
Yeah, I can get the message over here.
Okay, so we have 32% are yes, 48% is no, and 20% is what is red teaming.
Great. We'll be answering that, right, Benjamin?
Yes.
We need to know. All right, next question. Are you outsourcing red teaming, for those of you that said yes, or are you doing it internally?
Or you could do both.
Or both, yeah. And this is going to help us for later on as well. So outsourcing, internal, or both? Let's show the answers to that.
Okay, so 13% outsourcing, 57% internal, and 30% both. Okay, cool.
And this next one was interesting to me when, Benjamin, when you proposed this question, we got into kind of a discussion, of course, because I was very curious about this. So how often are you doing red teaming? Weekly, monthly, quarterly, yearly, or not at all? And my questions were, well, why would you do it weekly? Why would you do it monthly, quarterly? Like, what's the difference and what's right, what's wrong with that? So Benjamin I was a good student asking all the questions. Let's see those answers.
Okay. So 9% weekly, 6% monthly, 29% quarterly, 24% yearly, and 32% none at all. And so the reason why I asked this question is because if you do an assessment, you might be all good. But then 2 weeks later, a vulnerability came out, you haven't patched for it, and now you're not prepared. So it's only as good as your last assessment. So the more you can do them, the better you're off, because when you think about red teaming, red teaming, blue teaming, purple teaming, the premise is the same way. You find the vulnerability, find the problem, and then you correct it or you exploit it. And if you exploit, then you correct it after exploit. So those are all the things that are similar. So the things that we're going to be talking about today can totally apply to the blue team and to the purple team that are doing both.
Awesome. And the last question, we ask this every workshop, and it just kind of helps us level set, or what are the masses thinking about? The question is, my organization is most concerned with these types of threats: nation state threats, hacktivists, insider threats, ransomware, espionage, domestic cybercrime, brand abuse, reputation. So if you haven't attended, there's one of these that is always the highest. And I wonder, Kim, since you weren't on the last couple of them, which one would you say that was?
If I had to guess, I would go with the ransomware.
Okay.
That's a good guess. You do not get the gift card, but it is a good guess.
Okay, so the top one is ransomware, followed by nation state threats, then brand abuse, hacktivism, and domestic cybercrime and espionage. Wow. Okay.
Outside of ransomware, though, they're all pretty even.
Yeah.
And that's it. Benjamin, I will let you take it away and talk about our agenda today.
Okay. So we're not going to have a lot of slides today. A lot of it's going to be hands-on, going through and getting you into the mindset of thinking all the things that you have to have at your disposal to be able to do this. And we're going to do this manually. And then I'm going to show you how you can use RiskIQ Illuminate to actually have a majority of it done for you automatically. And it's updated every day. So that will be the outcome of what we're going to show. So what is red teaming? And then where can RiskIQ help you in your red teaming? And then how to identify attack surface risks. And that's to your organization or your supply chain. But today we're going to go through and talk about this, the manual issues of gathering this data and putting it together. But before we get into that, I want to explain about RiskIQ, how we gather the data, what we're doing. So when you go through and you try to think about what you have to do in your red teaming exercises, it's kind of the same steps that you're going to be doing anyway. But we're doing it for you. And there's some benefits to that. So we're going to focus on the threat intelligence part, and we're going to focus on Illuminate and PassiveTotal. So Illuminate has the threat intelligence portal. It has the attack surface of your organization. So if you create an account with your work email, we'll give you access to your own organization so you can see the problems or the risks that we see from the outside world. Highly beneficial, very good for you to understand where you need to focus your attention, whether you're on the red team, the blue team, or the purple team. Now, the attack surface management aspect, the digital footprint that dives deep into the page content, what's there, or the risks associated with configuration stuff, that's another topic that we have other solutions for, okay? But when you think about the challenges, everyone's going digital. Hybrid cloud, everybody's moving from internal to external, and there's some things that are going to stay internal, but a lot of it's going to move outside. And to be able to understand, everything you have on the outside world that you own and control. But then the other aspect is, what do I rely upon for my organization to do business? It's really important to understand that and to find out that visibility, because you might be secure, but you're using another piece that's integral to your organization. And from that, if they get compromised, you can get compromised. So if you think about like Target years ago, when they got compromised, they had a HVAC company that took care of all the heating and cooling for all the Targets. and that machine got compromised at the organization that took care of it. And from that, they got into all the targets, and then they were from there were able to laterally move and install, software to steal credit card data from all of the cash registers. So it's really important to understand everything that you're doing, from even a physical to a operational and application way, how they all interconnect and all those issues, because you only need to get in one way. You have to protect everything at an organization, but the bad guy just needs one way to get in. And once they're in, they're in. So we're going to show you how to have those insights to prioritize what really matters. When we collect this data, where are the risks? What are the biggest risks to you, and where to focus first? And then once you address those, your organization gets better over time. So what we're going to show is precise, actionable intelligence from direct observations. We actually gather the data ourselves. And so we're able, it's not a feed, it's not from somebody else. We're gathering this data. So we know it's accurate. We know the context of how it's gathered, how it's interconnected with everything else. So you can know exactly what you need to do to get the best outcome. And then the things that we're doing for all the organizations, we're also doing against the bad guys, their tooling, their infrastructure, things like that. So then you can take that information, apply it internally, and be protected against those tools and threat actors. And so that's how you can use this to defend at scale, in a global scale. So there's really two sides of the coin when you think about it. Part of it is your external attack surface management, everything that is seen from the outside world. And that's like what the red team is doing. They're driving by the organization, seeing from the outside and seeing where those holes might be. And then the threat intelligence, knowing about the criminals, the nation states, the malicious infrastructure, the tooling, the techniques that are being used, and understand the vulnerabilities that are being exploited in the wild, will then allow you to apply that to say, oh, these vulnerabilities are being exploited, and I have that vulnerability somewhere in my attack surface or my supply chain. Okay, I need to fix that immediately. And that's where these come together. So there's really two halves of the coin. And when you think about it, part of it is internal and part of it is external. So from the device side, from that, this is where you'll see like the endpoint protection. You're doing malware analysis, sandboxing, you're grabbing those things, and you're taking that information and protecting the assets inside the organization. Now, RiskIQ has a complete outside view perspective, okay, which every organization lacks because they can't go out and gather the amount of data that we have. So from that, that's the digital side. So the same type of protection that you can apply to your end devices, we can apply to the internet. So from that, from the attack surfaces that we understand, and from the graphed relationships of what's coming in and what's going out of every website in the world, and understanding those threat indicators, you can take that and then apply it to your internal machines, and now you're protected from those outside threats. And that's kind of where they marry together. And that's how we're helping with all the Microsoft products to become more aware of what's happening, understanding the context, and allowing somebody to take action earlier or proactively to prevent it from occurring in the first place. So the nice thing is that we all play on the same battlefield. So we're all on the same internet. And from being on the internet, the threat actors can avoid leaving signals. And so from that, from an initial connection, if we take a look at initial connection, that person might have an IP address, there'll be a net block, an ASN, an ISP, just from them connecting to the internet. If they create an email, the email is going to have, an email provider like Gmail, if you use Hotmail, Yahoo, if you're using Outlook, all those different types of things. There's a way for us to figure out who that is. There'll be a subject, there'll be a body, there'll be headers that we can analyze. There might be attachments and even timestamps. So we know when it was created, when it was sent, when it went through transit, and all that other information. Now, when it's transmitted, we know all of the routers that they went through to get to where it needed to go. We know the IPs, the net blocks, the ASNs, and the times. When it's received, you can have a read receipt, so you know when it was read. There's a notification. It could have HTML, which could run something to go back, and it can be fingerprinted to understand more about that host, get its name, where the person was by the geolocation information. Now it can execute binaries, do some external type of fingerprinting, some dependency checks, see if it's clicked, if there's some redirects, all from when that email is read. And then when there's compromise, they'll have access to the IP, the net blocks, the ASNs, any external actions of command and control, unique strings that can be run, and then the TTPs of might be they might understand like when you're going to work, when you're active, what machines you're accessing. There's a lot of stuff that you can do once it's compromised, and then it can laterally move and do different things. Now, with RiskIQ, we're gathering the entire open internet. Okay, so with that, we're going to every IP address. We're contacting all the name servers, all the DNS servers. So we're grabbing all these things, but we're doing it from a client perspective, the end user perspective, which is different than a lot of other places gathering data. And the reason why we do that is we want to act like the intended victim. So we're going to come out like every operating system. We're going to appear as every type of device, coming from different type of IP addressing, from corporate, from residential, from mobile IP space. So then we can trigger what's there or get things loaded to understand that full client-side document object model to see what comes in and what goes out. See the cookies, the trackers, what images are loaded, and different types of relationships that we will see. We're also bringing open source intelligence. We have one of the largest mobile app databases in the world where we understand what happens with those. We're also looking at all different open ports, who is information. So we're doing about 2 billion web requests a day. We have over 250,000 new domain resolutions each day. We observe over 300,000 new ports every day. And we have over 106 billion total unique DNS records. So with that, we can go back in time about 11 years and understand what's happening. So if something's privacy protected today, we might have seen it way back in the past, so we can understand how it's changed, what's occurred. So with that, hold on, I'm trying to get it to move forward. Can everybody hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, my slides have frozen. So let me do one more time. Okay.
It's all that bad weather moving across the country, slowing everything down.
It's slowing everything down, so it's not working. So let's see. Okay, here we go. Okay, so the cool thing about what we're doing at RiskIQ is every day that we collect the data, we merge it with the previous 11 years of data. And at that time, we can actually roll something forward from the beginning of time forward. So if there's a new type of detection, if there's a new way of analyzing the information that we previously gathered to say, oh, we understand now that this combination of things means this application's running. Or we created cookies. We went back and said, hey, when Turla was out there doing attacks through satellites, we were able to track all the infrastructure to a single cookie. So we went, that's really cool. So we made cookies available and went back and rolled them forward. And then we're able to link other infrastructure together, other attacks going back through time. So we have really good security research and threat intelligence people that work with our data scientists to make these machine learning things, models, and rules to be able to go back and add that information in as it comes in. And then we capture all the data. So the document object model, the who is information, the passive DNS, the certificates, the services we see running, the host pairs, what's going in and out, the web components, what apps are running, the trackers, the little bits of code that maybe look at user experience, but if someone's duplicating your website, they might duplicate your trackers and your cookies and things like that. So all that data comes in so we can derive all this information. So that gives us the capability that if we start with a single piece of information, like a piece of malware, we can say, oh, that malware was seen on this IP with this certificate associated with it. And that certificate was associated with this domain and other IPs. And we build what we call the infrastructure chain. So everything that's involved in that threat. And then with that, we can take it and we can use it. So when we look at like the MITRE attack, the reconnaissance, the resource development, initial access, this is where the red teaming is generally focused a lot of their time and attention. And about 90% of this RiskIQ does today to have this information available to you. And so we're going to go through and we're going to talk about this and we're going to show how this can help your organization. Now, RiskIQ, now that we're part of Microsoft, we're working with the teams to really bring our information deep inside of Sentinel and Defender and other products so we can actually make it a better story where we have the outside and inside merging together to give you that context and understand the full scope of that attack so you can get the full context to make a decision if this is okay or if it's bad. And if it's bad, where it all is, so you can take action. Or if you find something new, to go back in and find new detections. So today we're going to talk about red teaming and the attack surface. So the last two slides, and then we're jumping in. So inside of RiskIQ with the attack surface management, once we discover that attack surface, we understand what's running and what's installed. And we can even look over time and see how quickly an organization patches, because we know when the versions change. So we can look and say, oh, they're patching on a monthly basis, a weekly basis, a quarterly basis. Oh, they're not patching at all. So we can actually look and see that. We have continuous detection. So as we go out there and we gather this data, we're updating these attack surfaces so you understand what's happening. Now, we also do the same thing for the threat actors out there. So we can look at those and then we take that information in. You can run notebooks and workbooks to be able to execute this information and understand the risks and exposures to the organization. So the other thing is from the threat intelligence side. So this is from all of the open source intelligence that we've gathered from people publishing that our threat researchers will add content to, or things that we've created ourselves. Doing malware and phish detection from our crawling infrastructure or from working with partners. And then you have to remember that everything we have are from direct observations. We're viewing this stuff ourselves. That allows us to understand the emerging threats that are happening to the world and understanding the vulnerabilities, and then so you can prioritize where to take action and to be able to do those advanced threat huntings to find those infrastructure chains of everything that's bad and take those back in and do action. So here we go. So we're going to start now. So we're going to have a couple ways of giving you this information to make it easier for you. So I'm going to do some pasting into our chat so you can see this. So when we start off, we're going to be using a shared credential. And the reason why we're doing a shared credential day is we're going to talk about some attack surfaces. And I want everybody to see the same attack surfaces. So we have ctw@threattracking.com.
And you go to community.riskiq.com.
Correct. So can you paste that in, Jackie? And I will paste in the credentials for everybody.
Sure thing.
Okay. It
looks like Kimberly has it up there.
I'm on it.
Okay. And I'm just trying to bring up my text editor. I have a lot of windows open.
So if you go to community.riskiq.com, it'll ask you to log in. Your account is the ctw@threattracking.com, password RiskIQ, capital R, at 2022.
Okay. So I'm pasting a few things as well. So the tools that we're going to be using today, and remember, I'm going to show you a manual way to do it. And the manual way might not be using all of RiskIQ's RiskIQ Illuminate, but you can do it in there. So I'm trying to show you other ways that you can gather this, like what you would have to do if you didn't have RiskIQ Illuminate on a daily basis. Okay, so we're going to be using CISA and Nist to be able to understand, what alerts and bulletins are out there from the government talking about vulnerabilities. and then the vulnerabilities that have been announced by manufacturers about their products. And then when they're fixed, or if there's even proof of concept attacks out there for those vulnerabilities. Okay.
Benjamin, is this all real, live? I mean,
yeah. So everything is real and live. And so here's the links to this, but I need to tell you about the disclaimer. So what we're going to be doing today is working with live data. RiskIQ doesn't have any canned data. So this is real things. And when we go through and talk about these things could be malicious. So you want to have caution when you're doing red teaming. So for example, you don't want to visit directly any of the things that we're doing, because you could inadvertently show the person you're red teaming or the threat actor that you're investigating them. You could get blocked and not be able to see the data. They can filter out your IP ranges, for example. So a couple organizations I work for that were being attacked, you would go from the organization and try to investigate, and you couldn't see it. But if you went through another IP address, you were able to see the attack. So it's really important to hide what you're doing. And we're going to talk about this in a second. But please be careful. You know, the lawyers rule the world, like Josh says, and you need to be careful, because you don't want to bring any malicious data or malware on your machine and potentially harm your organization. So just bear that in mind. So when we talk about, what is red teaming, okay? We're going to go through and talk about that real quick. But the red teaming it's a crucial part of an assessment for an organization to see how the outside world sees you, how a threat actor sees you, and the things that they might do to attack you and gain access to the infrastructure to laterally move and steal information or cause harm to you. So we're going to go through the phases, and for each one of these phases, we're going to talk about some of the questions you should be thinking about when you're doing this. Okay, so during the planning and setting the objectives, it's really, really important to get absolutely everything in writing, so that if something happens, you're okay. But you need to make sure that it's been blessed by the higher ups in the organization, not just the boss. You need to make sure that the CEO knows, all that stuff, and you get signed off from their legal, because let's say, for example, you cause an outage doing your red teaming and they lose business. Are you going to get sued? Are you going to get fired? It's really, are you going to go to jail? It's really important. If you're on shared infrastructure and you take down an org by accident, and it also affects other organizations, you could be responsible for that. So you need to be careful. Okay. So you have to determine, what the company, what things belong to the company, their IPs, their domains. Do they own any subsidiaries, any other organizations? What IP addresses are associated with them? Who owns those domains? Where are they registered? Where are they in the world? Because you might have different regulations if you're doing these types of exercises, that you might need to know the local laws or the country's laws about doing these types of things. You need to be able to determine, what applications you're going to be looking after. How far are you going to go? Like, are you allowed to cause an outage? And if you cause an outage, are you clear? Do they understand that if you're really attacking and trying to go through ports and things, you can lock the systems up and they might not work? So if that occurs, do you need to notify their SOC or NOC to say, hey, we were doing the red teaming exercise and we broke something? Do you need to tell them that? It's really important. So during the reconnaissance phase, there's a lot of things that you need to think about. How are you going to hide your reconnaissance? Are you going to use a proxy? Are you going to use a hotspot? Are you going to use a library's Wi-Fi? Are you going to use a coffee shop's Wi-Fi? Your neighbor's Wi-Fi? A stranger's computer? If you think about the things that you're doing, it's kind of like the threat actor. So the threat actor doesn't want to get caught. So they might break into a machine and use that machine to go do the attack from. So when you trace it back, you go, it happened from this computer, this house, but that computer was compromised. So a lot of times when you do these investigations, you never tie it to a person, but you tie it to a device and say, this device did it, because you don't know who might be behind that device. You might even buy a brand new computer that's never been on the internet before, because if it was on the internet before, there's probably some Google or Facebook cookies saying, oh, that machine is that IP and is associated with this MAC address, either through the Ethernet or the Wi-Fi, and that belongs to this person. So you might need to like start off from something completely scratch, so it's not tied back to you.
Or your neighbor.
Or your neighbor. That's why I said the neighbor, because I actually did an assessment for a friend, and my neighbor said, yeah, you can use my Wi-Fi, because I didn't have enough bandwidth. So I did that. Now, when you're thinking about infrastructure, what are the email addresses associated with the domains? What other servers are on the same name server? Because if it's on that name server, there might be other related infrastructure there. What are those corresponding IP addresses? What banners are coming back when you talk to those IP addresses on different ports? What applications could be running on those domains? What are the operating systems, versions, and the network infrastructure? Are there any Cisco devices, Palo Alto, Fortinet? Are they physical? Are they virtual? All those things are going to help you determine, what you can potentially do. Like, is it GPC? Is it in Azure? Is it in AWS? There might be some social reconnaissance. You might need to go and figure out, what are the email addresses associated with this organization? Were there any credentials that were exposed? If I go to the company's website, can I find out who the executive team is? Who the leadership is? What social media accounts are out there? Who do they follow? Because you might need to go in through another person or impersonate a different person to get somebody to do something. And you might even need to research who their admins are, because in a lot of organizations, the admins have access to the executives' calendars. They might have access to areas where they're not very savvy, but just in case that leadership needs access, they'll call their admin and say, can you do this for me? Can you send me this file? Can you do this? So they might have elevated access and privilege that could be exploited. And it's something that your organization should look at from the blue teaming perspective to verify that there's checks and balances and the proper rights are associated with account credentials and things. And then there's physical type of reconnaissance. So I always have the motto, if I can touch the device or the piece of equipment, there's no security. I can get into it. If I can touch it, I can get into it. At an organization, years ago, the financial services, before I got my certified ethical hacking certificate, the director of IT, I said, hey, we're not secure. You're trying to roll out Wi-Fi. And this is when Wi-Fi was very early. This is like in the early 2000s. Said, hey, we want to put Wi-Fi everywhere and have it on our network, and everyone can go from conference rooms to their office, and they don't have to be on a physical connection. We go, great, but we have to do it a different way. We have to go through a VPN. You're going to get into the Wi-Fi, and from the Wi-Fi, it only sees the VPN. You'll VPN in, and we won't allow split tunneling, and you'll be an island. You can use it. When you disconnect, you can go back to your office, you can print, you can do those things. But while you're on the Wi-Fi, you're an island, no one can talk to you. And they go, no, Benjamin, you don't know what you're talking about. And I go, we're not secure. So my boss had told me, okay, I'm writing a file to this particular folder. I'm going to put some information in there. If you can get the file out of my laptop that I take with me all the time and I have access to, and take that file and put it on this server that we just put online that I know you don't have access to, and Brian is the only one that has access to it, and he has the credential, and the credential is in his USB drive that he wears, then I'll believe you and we can move forward. So, okay.
I think we know where this story's going.
Yeah. So I said, okay, no problem. How long do I have? And he goes, you have 1 week. So within 1 week, when we meet next week, you can tell me if you're successful or not. And I want you to tell me what was in the contents of the file. And then I'll log into the server and you can tell me where you put it on that server if you get in there. And then I'll believe you. And then I'll take your word for it. So what happened was we went through and I set up a Wi-Fi outside in a car through an inverter. And I was able to use something that had just come out, which was a USB U3 drive. If you've never heard of these, back in the early 2000s, it was a USB drive where I could take my applications with me. So if I went to a kiosk and I wanted to print a document, instead of just having my documents, I can have like Word installed on there and I can run Word and then edit my document and then print it. So I can have the apps and the data with me at the same time. And it was before we had, Wi-Fi. We had cloud apps where we can do this. So it was a novel concept, but Hack5, HAK5, had this, I think it was called Hacksaw at the time. And so they had this ability where you can run a batch file. So it auto runs as the user and you can have it do something. So I knew what Wi-Fi the person had access to because they would go to, I had gone to their house before, so I knew what it was. So I made the Wi-Fi the same as their house and the same as their access point at their house, so it would connect to it. And then I set up a route through a batch file to add the route to the machine. And I had given him my USB drive and go, hey, the file you wanted is here. And he plugs it into his machine, it runs it, it adds it, connects to the network. And at that point, I had a way to get back into the machine. So I was able to grab the file. Now that same USB hack also had the ability to run it was Stunnel, was to run a connection out to Gmail, and it would zip any other USB you would plug into a machine, and it would then, at that point, anytime a new USB was plugged in, it would zip the contents of the USB and email it to a Gmail account. And so I had that USB set up, and I went to Brian. I go, hey, that architectural diagram you need, it's on my drive. He goes, great. He throws it into his machine. He brings it up. He grabs the document. He gives me my USB drive back, and now he's been owned. And so at which point I say, hey, Brian, can you go and check and tell me the version of this switch that was installed on the network? He goes, no problem. He pulls out his USB drive. He plugs it in. He pulls up his very long, like 26-character password. And he copies it and he pastes it in and he does it. And then at one point I look and I have an email that came in. I had the contents of it. So at which point I had every password that was on his device. So I go back to my office and I go in and I grab the file. I had the file. So then I just go put it on the folder, and next week comes around. I go to my boss and I tell him, okay, I'm all done. You had Benjamin, there's no way you're going to get this file. That was what was inside the file. And it's on the server in this directory. And he logs in and he goes, oh my God, how did you do it? And I explain what I did. And he goes, okay. I believe you, but I don't think others are going to believe, what we're going to say. So go and get your certification. So over a week class, I went out and took all the tests and in LA and through EC Council and got certified as ethical hacker. But I had to show them that they were susceptible to these attacks in order for them to take me seriously. So when you're doing these reconnaissance, part of it might need to be physical. But if you're going to do a physical type of attack, you have to be careful and don't go past what is acceptable because they could potentially, fire you. So like if you're getting into areas where you don't have access to, just to show them that, hey, I got in there, and you didn't have permission to do that type of test, you can get fired. So
even if red team is in your title, make sure it follows.
Right. So is that something that has happened in the past?
I know of a story where that happened to somebody, a previous job that I worked at.
Right. And these are the type of things that you hear all the time. So like at a previous company, I had gone out to a security show, and there was this program called Lothcrack that could dump all the hashes from a Windows server if you had access, and then look at the hashes and crack all the passwords. So I got this program, and I show the director of IT, and I say, hey, look at this thing. It can dump all the passwords and tell you, if you have weak passwords or if they haven't ever changed their password. And he goes, run it. And I go, no, we need to get permission. He goes, no, just go ahead and run it. We'll do it as an audit. And I'm the head of audit and security, so you have permission. Okay. So I run this thing, and it cracks everyone's password. And we see that a lot of people just had password 123. Some people had never changed their password for like 3-4 years. So we expired everyone's password and then said, hey, your passwords aren't good. You need new passwords. And we got in trouble. And I got in trouble. And that was the time I got in trouble. I go, what my boss told me to do, he goes, Benjamin, you shouldn't have done that. You should have gone to legal. Legal should have said, hey, you can do it or not. And then we should have notified everybody, because you caused people to not have access to their data because of this thing happening. So you need to make sure that you're okay with it. Now, when you do the target identification, the big thing to think about is what are the vulnerabilities that are out in the world or on the machines that you can find that relationship with, where it's going to be your vector of attack of how you're going to get in. They're going to be from apps. They're going to be from operating systems, from network devices, even IoT. And you can do these research through Nist and also packetstormsecurity.com. And those are where they publish the known exploits that are out there as proof of concept, so you can actually see it. Now, when you gain access, there's different ways to gain access. Some could be through phishing attacks. It could be through an implant. So I could put a keylogger. I can put a device, on a conference room television to send me all the data, what's being presented on the screen, that I can watch it outside or on the web. You can go to an affected website. You can have it in an ad that plays on the machine and they get compromised. In a macro, in a document, a compromised password that was out in the world that was published. Or from the deep and dark web, where somebody will advertise, I have machines that have been compromised inside of this organization, and I'll rent you access to those machines. So those are all the different things that you have to think about. Now, once you establish the foothold, the big thing is maintaining presence. And you might do this through like Cobalt Strike, different ways of understanding, like how to have it beacon out to a command and control, where you can send commands back through, like in the old days, and through a chat. You can have it monitor a chat and then see what commands are there and execute those commands, or through a way of every so often going to a domain that the IP address is changing all the time, and then you change it to the one where it has the commands and it grabs it. There's different ways. And then when you complete the objectives, you need to understand up front during the planning phases, what are you going to present back? What type of information do they want to know, that if it was good or bad, or if they're safe or not safe, or where the vulnerabilities are, you need to understand that. And then the report is the final deliverable that you would give back to the organization to show where these are. And so we're going to go through these manually, and then I'm going to show you how you can do it automatically with inside of Illuminate. Any questions that came up?
I think that was a really good overview.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Love the real example too.
Yeah, with that U3 drive, they became like the rubber ducky. So if you go to hack5.org, they have all these physical pen testing tools, incredible stuff that have come out over the years. The Wi-Fi pineapple, different things. We'll talk about that. So first thing, get everything in writing. Get authorization before you do anything, and it must be in writing. What the rules of engagement are in writing. What resources, make sure that when you do the engagement, you know what resources belong to you and that or belong to the organization, that they and which ones they don't have any control over and they don't own. I know that I heard Darren Kitchen, who's the guy from Hack5, went to Syria to do a pen testing engagement with 60 Minutes. And it was for a bank where they used all of his tools to go in there and gain access and do things. And they knew the address of the bank. And so when they went there to do the engagement, they said, okay, we're gonna do Wi-Fi pineapples to do man-in-the-middle attacks and grab all the credentials from the local coffee shop at the corner. So we'll know all those types of Wi-Fi credentials, and then we'll use these USB drives to go and gather data and put things on the machines. So they show up and they go into the hallway and they make a left and they go to the bank and they do this assessment. And then they tell the people, yeah, we're doing the assessment for XYZ bank. And they go, oh, that's at the other end of the hallway. We're not that bank. So they did their assessment, their attack on the wrong bank. Oops. They were able to talk to them and tell them, this is what we're doing. Here's all the information, it's free of charge. And they got out of it. But they were in Syria doing this and they attacked the wrong bank. So really make sure that you know what you're doing, where they are before you do the first thing. Because if you make a mistake, you could go to jail. Even though they had everything in writing, they went to the wrong place. So be careful. So let's go start with riskiq.com. So open up your browser and go to riskiq.com, okay? And I want you to try to figure out a few things. Can you tell me who the leadership is, okay? And put it into chat. Where would I find it if I wanted to do that? So I'm going to stop here for a second, and I'm going to bring up my browser, and we're going to begin, okay? So this is the not so glamorous life of a red teamer. You're going to do your research now. Okay, so I go to riskiq.com. So I want to find out who would potentially be part of a phishing attack. Who would I send it to? So generally the leadership will generally have the most access. Or if I can impersonate them, could get the most information out of a real employee there. So where would I go? What do you think? Oh, somebody put it in. Daniel, good job. So if we go to About, okay, and if I scroll down, every website in the world has something where it says like leadership, okay? And here they are. Here's the leadership. So now I have a target list. I can go take these names. I can put them in LinkedIn. I can look at different Twitter, different things, and understand who their friends are, what they like to do, who they are, and their email addresses, okay? And so if you click on these, you can get more information. So now you have that. The next thing is, where are they located? Where are their offices? How am I going to find that out? Put in the chat, put in the QA or put it in chat if you want. It's up to you. Okay. Crunchbase. Somebody put something in Crunchbase. Very good. Okay. Contact us. Right. So if we go to contact us, okay, I get telephone numbers and I get 3 offices. So now I know their physical locations. So now I have that information. Okay. Now I know what countries they operate in. So if I'm going to do my engagement with them, I need to know the laws that are going to happen in London, in the UK, in Kansas City, and in San Francisco, in California. Okay. I need to know what I can and can't do so I don't go to jail. Okay. So now I have that information. Okay. So the next thing, you have to talk to them and figure out, hey, what are we going to do? How are we going to do this engagement? What do you want me to try to do? What's your ultimate goal? Is it for an application? Is it for a website? Is it for your office? Is it for your staff? And get that, and get it defined, what's going to happen if you cause an outage. Okay. I'll put the slide back up. If you break something, if I'm doing, a Metasploit or Cobalt Strike against a machine, and at the time when I did this, it was Core Impact at the time we would use to be able try to get in and execute a known vulnerability on a piece of hardware or application. I broke things quite a bit. And so they might say, hey, we want you to test against non-production machines that are set up the same way. So instead of going against the main site, here's another URL to go test against. And so that's what we did when I did my engagements. It wasn't on the main production site. It was on a copy of what was running in production that they gave me access to. They would say, okay, you can go from your IP to come in, and that's fine. Or we made it available to the world. It's open. It has dummy data in here, but the app is there. The app is set up the real way. It's connected to a separate database, and there's no data in there.
Hey, Benjamin?
Yes.
You mentioned Crunchbase. Somebody wants to know what Crunchbase is.
So Crunchbase, and I'll bring it up. So somebody put this in here. So Crunchbase is a program that's out here that talks about organizations and says who's there. Here's telephone numbers. Here's information about them. So it's a way of investigating a company. And some people use this for investments. Some people use this for, like, if I'm getting a job and I want to find out who works at the company. You can now find out, what friends of friends and maybe some relationship within LinkedIn or Twitter that you might be able to talk to them. So it's just a way of understanding the people, the technology, their financials, different things that were out there. So it's another investigation tool. Dun and Bradstreet, but you might have to pay for that. So there's different ones that are out there. Okay. Okay. Now what we want to do is we want to go into RiskIQ. And from RiskIQ, we want to start to gather the seeds that we need to investigate to determine if something is in there. And we're going to be looking at riskiq.com. Okay. So this is the general website. It's not the piece that's involved in Illuminate. We're just looking at this domain to see what that is. We're going to go through this one domain. We're not going to go through, it would take us several days to go through all the infrastructure when you see it at the end. So we're just going to focus on that. So let's bring up our browsers and let's go through. So if I log into RiskIQ, we're going to look at www.riskiq.com. So now that I have this showing up, you're going to see that there's this threat intel portal view of RiskIQ. And you're going to see some information about resolution, certificates, and even articles that might come up with that. But we're going to click on this little arrow here, okay? And now when we click on this, it's going to bring up over 11 years of information that we've gathered, okay? And we'll go through, we'll understand what's happening, and we can understand the history of this website over time as well. So this view right here is the understanding of what we've seen with RiskIQ. So in this heat map area is the number of unique IP addresses we saw on each individual day going back to 2010, okay? Going back to August 25th, 2010, okay? And if I hover over, you can see that information, okay? Now, there's a legend here, and that legend will show routable and non-routable in green, and people are thinking, it's the internet. How can I show a non-routable IP address? They get dropped. You're not going to see it. That's not true. So what happens is the name servers that are available on the internet might have a host name with an IP address that's going to a loopback, for example, a 127.0.0.1. Or it might be to an internal machine. If you misconfigured the DNS and it's accessible for the outside, it might show your internal IP addresses of a 192 or a 10 address, for example. If that IP address changes from non-routable, which would show up as gray, to routable, which is blue. And if we saw an overlap on the day where maybe when we saw it first, it was non-routable and then it was routable IP, that would show up as green. So by us going to the name servers and grabbing everything from the name server for all of the things that are in there, we get those routable, non-routable IP addresses, and we understand what those are. Okay, so that's why we see that. Now, the curve on the bottom is the end of the month. The curve on the top is the beginning of the month. So you can go back and select one day and see just those things on that one day, or I can hold the shift key down and select another box and see a whole range of IPs, okay? So I can filter my results to say, hey, I wanted to look at this period of time or all time. So I can even go back in time by going to the time bar and selecting any spot on the time bar and see that 6-month window of time, okay? And when I do that, it will refresh and show me the data for that time period, okay? And then if I want to go back, I can just refresh. That's the easiest way, or I can go select another period of time. I just like to refresh. Okay, so if we look at these IP addressing, I can look at the location and say these are all in the US. These are all the IP addressing. So if I should be dumping all of these IP addresses. I can select them all. There's, I can go back and select everything, or just go back and select, look at a year's period of time, 6 months period of time. But if I'm doing an active assessment now, I want to know what the current records are. So if I look at the first and last seen, you can see this IP address was seen October 23rd, 2019, and last seen on February 3rd, which is today, okay? So with that, I might want to grab just the last, month's worth of data and look at. Because if I'm doing an active assessment, if it's no longer responding to that IP address, it might not be part of that piece that I want to do the engagement on. So I can narrow that time period down. Okay, so what are the things I might want to do? Any suggestions? Anything coming in? What else would I might want to look at?
Somebody was asking for use cases for going back in time. So I was thinking, like, if you were involved in some sort of incident response,
right?
It's not necessarily something that's happening right now. You might not become aware of it, and it happened a month ago, and you want to see what's going on then.
So think of it this way. Let's say, for example, you're doing an incident response, and you know that you had a compromise, and it was during a specific period of time. I might want to go back and look at that IP range and say, show me that. I might want to go back and look at that period of time to see what was installed and running. If any DNS records changed, if any WHOIS data changed, name server information, those types of things. So I can say, hey, you weren't patched at this time and you patched at this time, and that's when the compromise was over, for example. They couldn't get back in. That might be a way to narrow that down, okay? So the next aspect to think about is you want to start figuring out some other emails, okay? So let's look at the WHOIS data. So if I look at the WHOIS data, okay, GDPR, pretty much all WHOIS information, you don't see it anymore. It's all privacy protected. But because we have such a vast history of data that we've collected over the last 11 years, I can go back to the very first WHOIS record that we have and see that, hey, domains at RiskIQ, I get the address, which was the address of our building where we were located at that time. I can find out telephone numbers associated with it, and each one of these can be searched on. So I can come in here and right click on domains, open another tab. I can look at the address, open another tab, telephone number, open another tab, and now see that data. So I can go back in and say, hey, someone at RiskIQ is another email. Here's the WHOIS history associated with that. Here's all the domains that were purchased, first and last seen. I can look at the information associated with the address, and it's riskiq.com. So those are all different things I can do just from there. But I can also just see them all in a nice view to say, Here are the email addresses. Here are the 3 different registrars that were used. Here are the 8 different name servers. So I can go to each one of these and say, hey, let me open that up in another tab and look at all of the resolutions that are coming from that name server and see what's in there, okay? Because it might be related. Somebody might have their own name server out there. So you might be able to see some other information, okay? Phone numbers, organizations that are listed. We have RiskIQ UK listed as one of the registrants, okay? So these are all things to give you that type of information, okay? The next thing is the certificates, okay? And why are the certificates important? Can anybody understand why?
Somebody says identifying additional infrastructure.
Yes. So you might be using shared infrastructure or using something that other people are using. So like if you're doing, let's say there's some sort of marketing type of stuff that's occurring where they might have several clients all associated with the same certificate, so they can do some tracking and understanding. So you can see right now, hey, I see Imperva in here. So that's looking at what's being sent into a machine and then look at the contents and blocking attacks in line as they come in. There's health revelations in here. myloanzone.com. They're not associated with us, but those might be other vendors that they're putting in there. And then all of the IP addresses associated. There's 48 different IPs. So these are all things I would want to investigate and see if there's a tie-in or not with those, okay? I can search on the certificate and see, is this certificate on any other infrastructure in the world? So if I right click and open on that, I can see everywhere else that has been seen. So all these 48 are here. So I can open these up in another tab or another window and see, hey, what domains are showing up with those? So if we look at this one, these are all the domains associated with that one. So these are all kind of related a little bit. And I think this is Encapsula, which is Imperva, that's in here, okay? So Encapsula, yeah. Okay, so these are all different things that you can do from just walking through. Now, one thing that's overlooked by a lot of red teaming is the subdomains. The subdomains are really important to look at because each and every subdomain here could be related to entirely different infrastructure in the back, okay? So it's really important to go through and look at all of them and understand those relationships and understand the infrastructure and where they're in the world, what's installed and running, because you only need to find one bad way to get in. And so the organization needs to protect everything, but you only need to find that one place they forgot. And this is a way that a lot of times you're able to get in is by looking at the subdomains. And so it's really important to make sure that you would right click, open these up, investigate, and see them all, okay? And there's 5,000 listed here, okay? So there's quite a few, okay? Now, other things for the reconnaissance to think about is understanding the infrastructure, okay? So if we look at trackers and components, we're going to start to understand the infrastructure, okay? So RiskIQ already goes out and gathers this data. So by us doing this type of investigation, hold on one second. I have a heater I'm going to turn off. It's getting a little too warm in my office. It gives me an understanding of the infrastructure being used because I might be using a supply chain. I might have something that if I get into that other place, I can get into the place I want to get into. So when you look at these engagements, you might go through a third party to get access to the real place that you want to get into. But when you do that, you need to get permission and make sure that that's part of it, that everybody knows that that's what you're going to do. Because if you hack somebody else to get into the place you need to get into, you can be arrested for hacking that one place. So you need to be careful. That's why everything needs to be in writing, and you know your swim lane and you stay within it, and you know what the legal laws are in the area where you're doing this, that if you're going through the ISP and doing it, that they even know that you're going to be doing this engagement, so they don't go after you as well. Okay, so we can see Facebook, I see Twitter, Hotjar ID, Intercom. So we're using Intercom, Vimeo. They're using Vimeo, and there's over 800. So I'm just going to make this 500 so I can see that complete list. Google Analytics is in here. Trying to see Bitly. VirusTotal was listed here. Pastebin. Okay, so I see some of that infrastructure. Okay, the next one we're going to see the most is on the components, and this is also going to help you with that third-party piece. So Encapsula. So if I came out here and said, you know, what is that? So let's go back. I'm just going to copy this. I'm going to copy it, and if I didn't know what this was, I could paste it into Google and say, hey, what is it? Well, it's part of Imperva. Okay, and this is their application firewall that sits there and monitors the traffic and blocks stuff. And you can see, hey, it's cloud, it's part of Cloudflare, Akamai. They're all using that type of technology. Okay, so now I understand some of the infrastructure. I come back and I see connector, simple banner, a WordPress. So they're using WordPress. So if I know what version of WordPress, there's probably a vulnerability out there that I can exploit on the website, because WordPress is so heavily used, and not so many people are keeping things patched. So that might be an avenue for me to get in. If I go down some more, marketing automation with Marketo. So I can say, oh, they're using Marketo. So years ago, Marketo had an issue where they forgot to renew their certificate, and they went offline, and all these websites were down until their certificate was renewed, because everyone's thing was connected in, so they can understand the impact to like how well your campaigns are going. They were monitoring, and it broke tons of websites. So Marketo's there, and I'll expand this out to 500. And let's see, let's go down some more. Google Ads, Rackspace. Oh, so you're using Rackspace. So now I know in my head, okay, your hosting provider, one of them is Rackspace. Okay, so I can see Rackspace. I see Google, Nginx. You're using Nginx. Okay, so now I can know to search for that to say, are there any vulnerabilities out there? Okay. What else? I'm going down some more. Rackspace, Rackspace, Rackspace. jQuery. Okay, so now I have some understanding of the infrastructure. Okay, and this is not right at this point. RiskIQ would have no idea that I'm looking at them. Okay, because the tool has already gathered the data. I'm not going there directly. If I was going there directly and analyzing it, they would see my IP address of where I'm coming from. So if the blue team knew that the red team was going to do an exercise, and they start seeing people doing this activity, they can just throw up something and say, filter that traffic, and then you can't get in from that IP. So it's really important to hide your tracks in what you're doing. Okay. If we go back up to the top, we'll go down the next couple things. Okay. Host pairs. So this is another way to figure out the supply chain. So if I use this list of the child domains, okay, so I want to start with the parent. So I'm going to just filter on parent to say riskiq.com. And the reason why I'm doing this is I want to see what RiskIQ is going in and reaching in and grabbing and doing. Okay. So if I look at it from that perspective, think of it, parent-child relationship. If your child has something as a parent, you can say, don't do that, give it to me. And then your parents can look at you and say, hey, give me that. And you're going to listen to them because it's your parent. Okay. So RiskIQ parent is reaching out to use.typekit.net. Okay. So what does that mean? So let's understand what that is. Adobe, we use a special font, and it's grabbing it from Adobe. So now I know, okay, they're using Adobe. Okay, that might be something I want to look at. See, how can I leverage anything from there or make it look like it's coming from Adobe? If they were compromised, would they get compromised because it's pulling that? Maybe. So it's something to think about. Okay. I can come down Facebook, Intercom. Oh, they're using Intercom. So for their chat that shows up, they're using Intercom. All right. So now I know they're using Intercom. Going down some more, I'm going to extend this to be 500 just so I have everything possible listed. Okay. Facebook, Google. Okay. So I see that. Let me go back to the components real quick. I know there was Woopra as well when I went through here. Okay, let me make this, let me go to the next one. reCAPTCHA, Adobe Audience Manager, okay.
Which one did you say you're looking for?
Woopra, but I think that's on community. That's where I saw it. It wasn't on the www.RiskIQ, it was on community.riskiq.com. Mm-hmm. That's where I saw that because that uses Woopra. But these are all different things that you need to look at. Now, the other piece is to look at if there's any open source intelligence listed. So this might be talking about, that domain or IP being talked about because if there was an attack, there was some information associated with it. One other piece that I want to mention is if you go back to the first page, okay, if we go back to the threat intel portal, and if we search for something, okay, we can also see deep and dark web information. And we'll show you up to 15 items, okay? So if I came in here and I said at riskiq.com, okay, and we look at the deep and dark web, you'll probably see 20. So this might be saying, oh, there might be, hey, there was an article. It could be that, hey, there was a compromised credential. This is where you'll start seeing those types of things out there. So if you're doing an assessment, you want to look at the deep and dark web, Illuminate can allow you to see that information, and then you can actually, click on something and get the full details that it shows up. Now, one thing I highly recommend, if you're going to look at the deep and dark web, it might be in a different language. And with that, you might not be able to understand what is being said. So you can actually get a plugin for your browser to do that in real time. So I'm trying to see if anything is showing up in a foreign language. Let me see. No, these are all English. But I basically have the Google Translate where I can say, translate the page and understand what it's saying. Okay, so you might need that because it might be in Russian or Chinese or a foreign language that you can't figure out. Okay, in the US, Spanish, everyone can look at pretty much and go, oh, I know Spanish because we're so close to Mexico, or if you're up in the north part, maybe it's French for French Canadians. But other than that, you can click on it and translate. So this is really good to look at the deep and dark web. Okay, I'll go back to riskiq.com. And what I did was I created a project, okay? And let me find my project and show you what I did. So if we look at the three dots, the hamburger on the left, I can go look at projects, and I'm going to bring up my projects. And what I started to do was to grab all of those indicators. So all of the domains, all of the subdomains, the IP addresses, and I started to put them in the list. And what I would have to do at this point is I would need to go to each one of them, look at the infrastructure, look at any information, if the WHOIS information is different, the geolocation, the ASNs, the IPs, what's installed, what's running. And I would have to do that for each and every one of these assets. And there's thousands. I stopped at 1,600, but there was 5,000 subdomains just on riskiq.com. So it's really important to be thorough. And this is the non-sexy aspect, but it's very time consuming to do this. Each one of these, I might want to do a nessus to understand, what to fingerprint the machine, understand the operating system. I might want to go look at the open ports and banners. So there's a lot of stuff to think about. Now, when we go back and look at like an IP address, I want to go back and bring up riskiq.com and look at an IP address. If I open an IP address in Illuminate, it allows me to see a different tab that you don't see on the domain, which is services. So that tells me what ports are open. And we look at over, is it 120, over 121 ports, Kim? What is the?
I think it's over 150 we scan on a daily basis, and there's even more that we do more often.
Okay. And so you can see here all the ports that we see that was responding on this IP. We see that port 25. So like if you look at the different port numbers, here's for DNS, so it's bind. So if you know the port number, you can sometimes identify the application. Port 80 is for web traffic, and then you can see how that is. There's an 81 here, there's an 83, a 389, 443, which is encrypted HTTP. There's 45. So there's all these different ones. You can even, I'm trying to see if there's any other ones. 3392, I think, is for, 3389 is for remote access. That might be like through Windows remote access. So all these things are here, but you get to see the banners. And with that, that version information might be there. And that kind of helps us identify what's there, what's installed and running. So this helps us with that attack surface because we understand all these things, and it helps us with the fingerprinting. So if there was a misspelling in a particular banner, we can go through and say, where else is that misspelling in that same banner for that same port everywhere in the world? And we can link that together and say, oh, that's probably the same person doing this infrastructure because this unique occurrence of this in the banner is a way of fingerprinting that. So we can go through and look at, different things that are out here. See, there's a ton of ports in this particular case. It's because it's going through that Imperva in this case. So I'm trying to see if there's anything that pops out as really unusual. And you can see the certificates that are associated, the different fields that are out here. So this is a good way of, instead of running a Shodan or an Nmap or a Nessus, I can have this already. It's already done for me. So now I can pinpoint and know, hey, is it being filtered? Is it open or is it closed? How did it respond for that type of connection? Any questions so far?
I think we're doing good. Benjamin, I think your video is frozen, but we can still hear you and we can still see your screen.
Oh, my video froze? So let me do something. So I'm going to stop my video and I'm going to turn it back on. Did that help?
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Kim, we do have a question in the Q&A. I don't know if you can take that or take it offline.
Or do you want to ask it?
Oh, somebody's asking about red teaming. So isn't red teaming like attacking and scanning, or is it more of what you're demoing right now?
Well, part of this is we're looking at the reconnaissance part. So I can't attack until I know what's there. If I just throw every known attack at something, it's going to be very noisy. I want to be targeted. I want to just say, hey, if I understand what apps are there and what those vulnerabilities are, I'm going to try just those attacks for those vulnerabilities. So this is the first reconnaissance thing, but then I need to target, and it's pretty funny that you mentioned this. We're now to the next part where I'm trying to target now for vulnerability. Okay. So what I want us to do is open up these different URLs. Okay. So let me paste these in. Okay. These are the ones where we talked about the tooling. Okay. And now we're going to do target identification. Okay. So I'm pasting these in. Okay. And now that we have this, we're going to open up Nist and CISA. Okay. And we're going to look at those. Okay. So give me a second. I'm just going to stop sharing real quick. And I'm going to close out my tabs. And I'm going to open up my next set. Okay. supply chain, and there we go. Forgot to bookmark these, so give me 1 second. Oops.
Hey, Benjamin, off the top
Yes.
of your head, do you know if we can filter to open ports under the services tab in the web interface, or do you have to use the API to do that?
You would use the API.
That's what
So
I
with
thought.
the API is the best way to do that. And you can, I'll show some things on how to do it with vulnerabilities, to work from a vulnerability and see if it exists in the attack surface. But you can do the same thing for the ports.
Perfect.
Okay, and the last one, the alerts. And I'll explain why these are important. I have to take off the cease in the beginning. Here we go. Okay, so let's look at Nist. So this is the National Vulnerability Database. So when there's a vulnerability, it gets put into this database so everyone in the world sees it. So then the manufacturer says, yes, we know that this vulnerability exists. We're working on this fix. This is how it, for what versions it's on, and this is how you fix it. So if I put in Engine X, that was something that was running there, and I search it, here's all the vulnerabilities out there, and they go high, medium, version 3 and version 2 scoring. You can see if it's high, if it's medium, if it's low, and you can look at all of them. Now, what's really important to understand is that when attacks happen, or when you're doing your red team assessment, you might chain several vulnerabilities together to get access. So there might be some low priority attacks, but when you chain those together and then execute another one, you're more likely to succeed. So it might not be that you're just testing one vulnerability. You might do several to get to a certain point where you can do your, you can execute privilege and gain access to the machine. So just bear that in mind. So with these, if you select one of them and we drill into it, you understand some reference material, which versions are affected, up to, and any change history. Now, if I take that CVE, okay, I'm just going to copy that CVE number, okay? And if we go back to RiskIQ and I go back to the main interface, okay? If I just search for that CVE number, I get the same information, but I get more information, okay? So I can understand which component. If I have third parties, it will tell me if the third parties are there. If I click on the details, it takes me in even deeper, okay? And with that, I can understand like the article that talked about it. I can understand the scores. And on this right side, if there was a known exploit, there'll be a link to that exploit. And we'll see in some of them as we go through that some of these will have a known exploit that I can actually bring up and see, okay? Now, sometimes if something just came out, it was just announced today and just updated on those websites, we're 1 day behind sometimes because we update it once a day from there. So it might be published today, but this might show yesterday's data because it wasn't pulled. So just bear that in mind. And the following day, it should be there. Okay. So that's happened a couple of times when something's in the news and they go, this just came out today, and you come into RiskIQ, it might say, hey, it hasn't been updated yet. It's been reserved, that number, but it hasn't been published yet. But if you go to Nist, you might see the real publication. So just bear that in mind, that for things that just come out, this might be a day behind. And then as things get updated, there's a packet storm puts something out, you'll see it there, okay? Now, if we go to the bulletins, what's really important about this is that if you're doing red teaming, you always want to keep updated on like what attacks are happening, what's doing, and you might understand what's occurring if you look at these bulletins. So when you read the bulletins, you can see, hey, there's some stuff with Apache, there's some firmware with ASUS. So it's a way for you to understand what are the highest vulnerabilities that people are aware of. And if you're in the blue team, it's good to read these as well, because if you're going, oh, we have some ASUS routers, that we're doing for executives at their house to do their Wi-Fi, you might go, oh, okay, we want to make sure that we patch these, or we use these PCs, so we need to make sure that we put this firmware in place, update it to take care of them. Or we're using Apache or Dell or whatever's out there. So it's a good thing that, like, morning cup of coffee type thing, just to read and understand, because you might need to take action on these, either for use in red teaming or blue teaming. Okay. And now the other one is looking at that was the bulletins. Okay. Now looking at the alerts, let's look at, there was a log4j talking about the Iranian government sponsoring ATPs. So you can read about it, all the vulnerabilities they're doing, where it falls into MITRE. So this gives you some understanding of some TTPs and other things that might be out there that you might want to look at, and some detections and mitigations that you might need to put in place. Okay. Now, if I'm the red team and I know what mitigations they're doing, then I know what controls they're probably going to have. So then you can figure out another way to get in. Okay. So that's why it's important to understand your adversary by knowing what they're doing, and they're going to go buy this playbook. So if you know the playbook, then you can think outside the box. Okay. Any questions so far?
There is one question that somebody has, and I think this is just going to kind of be a matter of semantics maybe, or just the different ways that different organizations might label things. But somebody wants to know what the difference is between red teaming, intel-led pen testing, and a traditional pen test.
So a traditional pen test, you're going to give them, hey, these are IPs, these are our domains, or this is our app. We want you to go test it, and they're going to run like a Qualis scan. They're going to do some stuff, and then they're going to see what you're susceptible to. That's like the pen test. They're seeing but the red teaming is actually going to try the exploit. Hey, did you have a mitigating control for this exploit? I saw you were vulnerable, but I tried the exploit and I got in. So when you do the pen test, generally, what I've seen in organizations, they're not trying the exploit. You can, but generally you don't, because you can break things. So you're just seeing what those vulnerabilities are and taking appropriate actions. And most of the time you go, well, I have a mitigating control. I have an Imperva, and that's going to block it. So then it's okay that I haven't patched that thing, because the Imperva, if it does its job, is going to block it. But you really need to make sure that you're patching and you're doing your things. Where the red teaming, they're going for the keys. And they're going to do whatever they need to do to get those keys. And that's why you get those rules of engagement, because it might be they're doing the engagement and they go, I'm allowed to do physical pen testing as well for this engagement. So you might go in there and grab credentials from somebody. You might go in there and follow somebody from the office and figure out where they are and try to get their credentials or get access to a key card or clone a key card. There's a lot of stuff that you can do. So the red teaming is generally more doing the exploit, going in and grabbing something or showing that they were able to access that data, where the pen testing is doing it from an assessment perspective, where they're telling you where the problems are, so you can fix them without going that deep. That's what I've come across. That's where we drew the line when we did it. We would do red teaming once a quarter, pen testing weekly. So we would understand what the vulnerabilities were and if something was good or not. And then we had different machines that we can go deeper if we wanted to try the exploit. And that's what we did with the red teaming. Okay. So one thing I wanted to mention is that we have the capability of going backwards. Okay. And what I have here is I'm using the API. And this is already, this is a notebook that we had put back in the past to show, but it comes up all the time. So this notebook that I created with Mark Kendrick, I had the notion where I said, hey, if I have this CVE that's been in the news, like this is where your manager comes up and says, hey, I just read that there's this CVE that's out there and it's really bad. do we have it, or do any of our supply chain have it? And you get this dropped on you and you're like, oh, this is terrible. It's going to take me all day to figure out I have it. I'm going to have to make tons of phone calls. And I don't believe the third parties that we deal with for our supply chain. So even if they tell me that we're okay, we might not be. And you have to go through this exercise. But with RiskIQ, I'm able to look at that and understand it from this perspective. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to run this and we'll walk through it. So I'm going to run all the cells and we'll walk through it. So the way this works is I'm going back and looking at myself, my own organization, that's my attack surface, and anything in my third-party attack surface that I've added to being monitored so I can see it, okay? It's looking at two CVEs, CVE 2020-9490 and CVE 2020-1938. And with those, I can go through and I can look from all of the vendors that we're looking at and see those numbers. Now, when you're looking at a hosting provider like Microsoft and other Tencent and other ones, you might see that those numbers are very high. And it might be because people are just renting rack space, or they're putting their application and they're loading everything up themselves. So it might have these vulnerabilities. It doesn't mean that those organizations have it. It just means that something on that infrastructure might have it, okay? So as we go through and we look at these, it tells me what the vulnerability is. So that data comes back, and it's a flaw found in Apache HTTP servers 2.4.49, where the attacker could use a path traversal attack to map URLs to files outside the directories, and they can gain access. And it tells you, the scores, all that information, the CVE, the version 2 and version 3s, when they were published and when they were updated, how many observations, how many components, how many organizations were impacted. And by going through this, I can drill down and look at the United Nations, for example, and say, these are the IPs and these are the hosts that have that vulnerability there, okay? Because it's looking at that CVE and saying, is that version running there? But there's another aspect that RiskIQ does as well, which is called an insight. And the insight's not just looking at that CVE number and matching it to a version that's running. There might be some additional checks. So it might be that, hey, when you go to the banner and you put this in, you get this back. And if you get that back, that means you're susceptible. So it's a higher level of fidelity to say, hey, this is bad, you need to fix it, okay? Other than just looking at the CVE match, okay? So if there's an insight for it, means that we had the ability to do some deep dive to understand if this was really a problem or not, a higher risk, okay, to the organization. So just bear that in mind, that if it's just a CVE match, there might be a mitigating control that can do it. But if it's an insight, it's more likely a positive and needs to be fixed right away, okay? So I can filter those by IPs. I can filter them by hosts. I can even go by the attack surface number. And so when we get into the UI, I'll show you where that number is that we can look at. And this is the one for the Red Cross. And I can see the vulnerabilities that we have insights for. And they have some domains that have expired. They're using an old version of PHP. And they have an issue with Apache, okay? Now, I can look at myself and say, okay, here's that one vulnerability that I had with Tomcat, and it's on this developer website. Here are the three different CVEs that are on there, or the two different CVEs that are on there, or the ones that we see issues with. And I can go down and see, which host that is. So it's a way for me to run this and immediately know what I want to target for that CVE. So if I'm doing red teaming and I know that there's this vulnerability out there that I have an exploit for and I'm ready for, I can run it against all of their infrastructure immediately and understand it. So let's go to RiskIQ and let's look at the attack surfaces real quick. And let's walk through that before we go into like the physical stuff, just so you can understand what we're talking about. So if you go to the attack surface observations, okay, And remember all the stuff that we were gathering in the beginning and doing the research, and it was like tedious and like you're going, okay, it could change tomorrow. I have to go get more information. This attack surface composition here is already done for you. I know what IP blocks, I know the ASNs, I know the domains, I know the IPs, I got all the hosts, the whois, the certs, the cloud infrastructure. So if I go to domains, there's 109 different domains. These are not the subdomains, these are the domains. So I can right click and open on those. And if I do that, you'll see those populate in a second. I'll let that run and I'll do another one. Let's look at the certificates. I'll just click on it. Here's all the certs. First and last seen, all the data, who the issuers are. Here's the one that I'm looking at, the domains. I can see when they're seen, mark monitor. I can see all the ones associated with it. So I immediately have this data. So it gives me the capability of having that assessment information ready to go. Before I do anything, I don't have to do the research. It's already there. The next step up above are those insights I told you about. Like, hey, we can tell that there's a problem on these things. So this is that 2020-9409. So if I drill into it, I can look to see, hey, what that issue is. And this is that machine. And I can see the version that's running of Apache that has the problem in it. So I can see it, okay? Now, if I go back, I can run and look at the medium and the low. I can see if there's any infrastructure changed over the last 30 days, the type of web infrastructure being used, frameworks, which clouds are being used, vulnerabilities that were exposed by articles saying, hey, this article mentioned something that impacts you as well, compliance information, domains, and if there's any bad infrastructure associated with those IP addresses associated with that organization, okay? So this gives me the ability to start off right off the bat without having to gather this data. And every day it updates. So as we go on the crawl, these will update. You'll have the latest stuff on it. So if we go back and we look at the infrastructure, I'm going to open up some tabs here because I added them in so I can just show them all at once. So let me do supply chain. Where did it go? Here we go. So you can access yours by going into the third-party intelligence here and clicking on it and immediately seeing it, okay? So each one of those organizations now that we talked about, so like if I came in Adobe, here's Adobe's information, okay? If we come into Red Cross, here's the stuff with Red Cross that we brought up that we said, hey, that's part of their attack surface. Imperva. So with Imperva, doesn't mean that you're going to be able to get into Imperva and get into the client, but this is talking about their overall infrastructure and what's there. And it might be because somebody is hosting something that might have a problem. Through Imperva, you might see it there, okay? Intercom, here's the information with Intercom, okay? They're using Cloudflare and Google hosting, okay? How many domains and all that information. So I can have all this available. We're using Marketo, so here's the information on Marketo. And here's, I threw the United Nations in there as well. So I threw Red Cross United Nations just so you can see some additional information. But this gives you the ability that foundation of the targeting and the reconnaissance is ready to go. It's locked and loaded. So now you know what you need to protect from the blue team. But if you're doing the red team exercise, you know where to focus your attention because these are the low-hanging fruit. This is the problems that you see there that have been announced and known to the world. So if we go into one of these, so if I click on the observations, let's see if I can drill into one of these. So I'm going to grab this and read it and jump into it. Look at the vulnerability. It takes me out to Nist, but I can also look from just the vulnerability aspect. So from here, I can go back and view the vulnerability. And when I jump in and see it, you'll notice here this known exploit is showing up. So this is the packet storm information that talked about this exploit, this proof of concept exploit that's in here, okay? To see it. And if you register, then you can actually have access to see these things. But this gives you that understanding of what you need to protect yourself. Now, with this, if there is a known exploit and it is out in the wild and there's chatter about it, we're going to give it a higher score, okay? So by understanding that, when we have this insight, this is where it comes in to say, there is a proof of concept, it's out in the wild, there's chatter about it, okay, this is what I need to protect. But this is also from the red teaming perspective, this is the exploit that you're going to use in your engagement to go against that particular machine and try to gain access. So it's really important to understand, the patching schedule of the organization, because you can see when something's installed and running. So for example, if we look at RiskIQ.com and we look at components, for example, I will understand, like if I look at different versions, first and last seen. And if I know when a patch came out, then I can judge how quickly are they patching. Are they patching on a monthly basis, a quarterly basis, a weekly basis, a daily basis? I can then go back in and see this first and last seen and understand, hey, when did that occur? When did this change? Okay, which is really good, because if there's a new announcement and there's a vulnerability that's out there, and they patch every 2 weeks, and this just came out, they're not going to patch for another 13 days. You have a little bit of time to try to use that exploit. Any questions?
It looks like we have some Python fans online here, because we have several people asking about the notebook and whether that will be made available.
Totally, it is available. It's on it's hidden on our RiskIQ.com. So I'll give it to you right now. So I'll paste this in. Resources. Red team. I'll send you the link when we're done. But we have it posted. Our marketing team has posted all of our scripts onto a hidden non-index page where you can go grab and use them. And we'll send it out afterwards so you'll have access to it. So everything that we're showing today, you'll have access to. Let me go back and show you this. So when you're gaining access, one of the big things is, now that I knew the people to go after, how could I do this? How can I attack them? So one of the things I want to show is an anatomy of a phishing campaign. And I'm going to show you a pen testing tool called GoPhish. This is a free tool that you can download and use in your engagements. And I was so impressed with the speed to get this out, like to do an attack. I attacked myself and I recorded it so I can show you this is what we're up against. So with a spearfishing attack that's so targeted, and it's not out there where it's seen by so many different things, and it might only be up for a short period of time, this is what you're up against. So I'm just going to play this and I'll talk through it as it goes. So this is just like a 3-minute type of thing. So the way it works is when you start these types of engagements, I use this open source phishing framework called GoPhish. And we're going to be doing a spearfishing attack where we have a targeted list of people that we're going to send a message to, and we're going to do it. So the way it works is you determine who you're going to attack. And we did that with the leadership and different things. In this case, you're going to attack Benjamin. So they're going to log in, and this is all in real time. It's not sped up, and you'll see how fast it is. So the way this works is I can take a real list of email addresses, put it in, and I can take a real email and use that in my attack. So it's not like it's going to be something misspelled or not look like the real thing. It's the real email. It's just going to swap out the links that are in there. In this case, they're trying to take my FortiGate support login that I had a long time ago. So you go to the website where you want to get access. and you grab that URL. So now I have that. So I create my email phishing template in GoFish. So I've already set up how it's going to email. So this is how it works. You create the email template, okay? And then I import the email. So I go into the email and I view the source and I copy the source, okay? So once I copy it now, I now take that email and I import it in, okay? And once I paste it, I import it and I say change the links. So it will swap out whatever links are in to the links I'm going to give it, okay? I import it. So now I have my email. Now I create my landing page. So this is the real website that I want to get access to. So I copy it. Now I go in and I paste this in. I import the site, okay? I'm just naming it the landing page. I import it. I paste it. I import it. And I tell it to capture the data and capture the passwords. It gives you a warning because the passwords aren't encrypted. And then once it takes your passwords and credentials, it can log you into the real site. So you never know. So it's now going to paste it in. So it'll take me to the real site once it's stolen the data. Okay. So you save it now. Okay. So now that this is saved, you're going to run the campaign. And it's as easy as running a marketing campaign. You just click, okay, here's all the information. Now that URL is an internal URL, but I could have made it an external one with a free certificate authority. And I could have bought a domain that was typo squatted, for example, and do this. But it was against myself in my own lab. So here it is. And now I'm running it.
Or you could have bought one of the expired domains that you got from one of the insights on the dashboard.
Correct. So now I'm going to run this. And now it says it's sending the email. Okay. And then you'll notice that it will say email sent down on the bottom. And so now I can see this timeline. It says, hey, it was created, the campaign, it was sent. And this was back in 2017. I recorded this. Okay. It's a long time ago. It works the same way today. So now I'm going to open up the email. Here's the email. And I click on the register. And if you notice in the upper left-hand corner, it shows my IP address for that other domain. So I put in my credentials, okay, and I'm going to hit login. And if you notice, when I hit login, something happens, okay? So here's my password going in, okay, and I hit login. And now you notice it's the real domain up in the left-hand corner, but it didn't take it. So I'm going to click login again because, sometimes you click, it didn't take it. I'll click a second time. And now I'm in. And I go, great, okay, I'm in. Everything looks good. I don't know I was phished, but I was phished. So there's two different ways I can do it. Now I can replay the credentials. And if I click on replay, it will log me in directly without doing anything, okay? Or I can view the credentials and have them. And this is what you're up against, okay? This is how good it is and how easy it is to create a phishing campaign. Okay? And this has been around for many, many years, getting even easier over time. Okay, so the winding this down, the next thing is once I'm in, I need to maintain presence. So if I'm going to do that, I could write my own code and maintain it. And when someone identifies it, change it and do all that. Or I can use something that's off the shelf. I can use Cobalt Strike, for example. And a lot of the threat actors, they've compromised the key generation for licenses. And they're utilizing Cobalt Strike that's used by real red teams to go out and do real assessments. But they're using this to do the attacks because anytime a new attack is out there, they're updating the information, they're updating the library and how the attack functions. And these bad guys are just sucking it in and using it. So they're not going to have to generate anything for these attacks because Cobalt Strike is doing it, and they're just leveraging that infrastructure to do it. So a lot of times we see a lot of the attacks happening with that type of thing. So one of the things that RiskIQ does, and you don't have access to it within your credential that you're using today, but if you buy the threat intelligence package from us, we're gathering that data. And so what I'm going to do is bring up a tooling and look at Cobalt Strike. So if we take a look at this Cobalt Strike, these are all the state-sponsored bad guys that are using it, okay? And if you notice over here, there are public indicators and RiskIQ indicators. So released from open source information, there's 2,453 domains and IPs that are associated with Cobalt Strike. We have found an additional 8,000 indicators. So by going into this, I can look at these indicators. So if I wanted to protect my organization from somebody using Cobalt Strike against me that's out there, and it's one of these things that we've detected because we fingerprinted it out on the internet, I can download this list and have this list of over 10,000 IPs and domains and say to my firewalls and my endpoint protection, don't allow access from any of these. And inoculate my organization from any of this command and control stuff. If you're trying to talk to one of these, don't let it. And you immediately inoculate yourself from these things. So by us understanding the infrastructure that's being leveraged, whether it's shared infrastructure or tooling that's being used, you can protect your organization from these things. But these things are being leveraged by real red teams and real bad guys to do harm. So for good and for bad, but you don't know which one they are. So it's an easy way to just, if you're on the blue team, block them all. And if you really want them to use it, you can open that particular one up and go, hey, if you're using Cobalt Strike and it's on the internet and RiskIQ has scanned you, you're not going to be able to use that. So they're going to have to go and put on new infrastructure, not get scanned, and it's going to be harder for them. But that's okay because you're protecting your organization. So that's where the red and the blue teams might butt heads, but that's okay because this is what real life is and what you have to do. Okay. So when you're thinking about when you're completing your objectives, how are you going to be able to take those observations and issues that you found, and if you got in to get something or place something or showing where the problem was, how are you going to do that? And with the third parties, understand that. So remember, with that view that you saw with that attack surface, that's pretty much your report. You can say, hey, these are the machines that you have a problem. These are the insights where it's very high confidence that that's there. These are all the distributions. This is where all the IPs are. This is pretty much it, other than doing the actual attack to get in. This is all the grunt work, all the reporting, and then your findings is whether you got in or not. It's added to that and you're done for your red team.
Awesome job, Benjamin. Do you need to take a breath?
Yeah, so just remember that you can join the community and get access. And if you use your real email, a real work email, we'll give you access to your own attack surface. We don't give you access to, like, if you go, I have a Gmail account or a Yahoo account, you're not going to see an attack surface. But if you use your real work, we'll actually give you an attack surface that you can see. And if you kick off the Illuminate trial, for 30 days, you have access to it. Yep. Now, all of those third parties, you buy those third party ones to say, hey, these are the ones I want to keep track of. These are the people I'm doing business with. I want to make sure they're secure. You buy those. You don't have access to them. So that's why we created this account, to show you the capability of what you can do with it.
And we promised that we would give a $100 gift card away. Can I get a drum roll? Adon C, or Adon C, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. You are the lucky winner. So we'll get in touch with you outside of this.
So just bear in mind that with great powers comes great responsibility. Having this information is highly important. And like, you can look for a version of software that's out there and see everywhere in the world it is with RiskIQ. So I can look for next gen or Apache version such and such and see the global scope of it. So that's like what happened with the Microsoft Exchange issue. We could tell everywhere that Exchange was down to the version. And we could see as it was being patched from 400,000 potentially affected machines. And as they patched, it got down to like 20,000 within a week. So we could see that whole trend and see how quickly the world was adapting to these. So just be aware that this is all public data. This is what the bad guys are doing. This is the type of techniques they're doing to get in. And by understanding what's there and understanding the red team and what they're going to do can help the blue team protect themselves or the red team to do their assessments. So both sides can use this, but be careful, get in writing, understand your swim lane, stay within those guidelines, and don't be evil. Do good and help make the internet a safer place by understanding and fixing the problems that are out there.
And we went through some of the stuff, kind of quickly. So if anyone has questions, the best way to reach us is it success@riskiq.com. And also you can sign up for a free trial, like Benjamin was talking about earlier.
Yep. So please give us feedback and let us know what other things you want to cover. This was one that came up from the audience, from the community, say, hey, can you tell us about red teaming? How can we use RiskIQ and red teaming? That's how this one came up. So please let us know of any future ones that you'd like to see. This was a fun one. I love telling the stories on my career, what happened and how I almost got fired and how I protected the internet. So it's really cool to be able to do these things. But do it for good.
I love hearing the stories about how you almost got fired. Please tell me another one.
I'll tell you the time I turned off the power at the data center by accident. I'll tell you that one later.
Awesome. All right. Thanks everyone. Join us in a couple weeks.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.